The response came back in crackling static, the voice of the Tactical Operations Center somewhere in South Vietnam. Copy, Diamondback Actual. You are cold at insertion. Weather moving in from the north. Request you move to higher ground as soon as feasible. Cole understood the implications immediately. The storm front approaching from the north would limit air support, would make extraction more difficult, would force them to move quickly to avoid being caught in a position where helicopter support was impossible. The clock had started. He pulled out his map, already marked with grid squares and terrain analysis, and oriented it by compass. The red lens flashlight hung on a cord around his neck, and he brought it up briefly to study the map. The cold LZ was approximately 3 kilometers south of their first nav point, a ridgeline that ran north-south and provided observation of Route 110. Cole looked up from the map and caught Y-BAM's eye. The Montagnard was waiting for the order, patient and still in the darkness. Behind him, Ipa was a shadow with a machine gun. Ijan was barely visible, his nervous energy suppressed into absolute stillness. Voss was breathing steady, ready. Marsh had the radio under control, the encryption variables set, the frequencies locked. The first rope fell away below the helicopter, and Weebam moved without hesitation. The Montagnard grabbed the rope, wrapped his legs around it in a practiced motion, and went over the side. In darkness, with a full combat load on his back, carrying a crossbow and a CAR-15, he descended into the jungle below as if he was simply going downstairs. Ipa went next, then Ijan, then Voss. Cole watched Marsh grip the rope with white-knuckled intensity, the tall radio operator's glasses slipping down his nose as he prepared to commit to the descent. The PRC-25 radio was going to be dead weight in the dark, pulling him down as much as carrying him. But Marsh did not hesitate. He went over the side. Cole was last. He grabbed the rope and wrapped it around his legs and torso in a practiced motion. The jungle was not visible now. The helicopter's rotor wash had kicked up so much dust and debris that it had created a temporary blindness. He released the cargo hook holding the rope, and gravity took him downward. Cole moved to the open door and looked out. The sun was disappearing rapidly now, the sky transitioning from blue to orange to deep purple. The helicopter descended gradually, following a winding course through the mountain valleys. The noise of the rotors made conversation impossible, but Cole could see Marsh checking his watch, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or might have been frequency checks. Voss sat with his CAR-15 ready, his eyes fixed on the tree canopy approaching below. Y-BAM appeared almost serene, his crossbow across his lap, his breathing deep and measured. The helicopter slowed, the descent becoming more acute. The jungle filled the entire view now, massive trees with a canopy so dense that individual trees became impossible to distinguish. They were looking for a cold landing zone, an area where the enemy was not presently positioned, where the team could rope down into darkness and disappear into the jungle before any response could be organized. The crew chief was shouting something, but the words were inaudible in the rotor noise. He was gesturing toward the door, pointing downward. The ropes were being deployed now, thick manila lines that would carry the weight of 6 men, their equipment, and all the ammunition they would need for 3 days in the jungle. Cole turned and caught Voss's eye. The sergeant nodded, and the gesture passed down the chain. Y-BAM, Y-PA, Y-John. Ready. The helicopter hovered perhaps 40 feet above the canopy, close enough that the rotor wash was crushing vegetation flat, creating a temporary clearing in the jungle below. It was hot, and Cole was sweating through his fatigue shirt, and his heart was moving faster than the resting pace, but his hands were steady, and his mind was clear. The team moved in practiced synchronization toward the helicopter. The side doors were already open, and the crew chief stood in the opening, gesturing them forward with urgent motions. The rotors created a wind that pushed at them, dust and debris cutting at exposed skin. One by one, the team members grabbed the sides of the helicopter and pulled themselves into the cargo bay. Cole came last, shouldering his way into the hot, deafening interior of the aircraft. The smells hit him immediately. Aviation fuel, hydraulic fluid, the metallic tang of steel and aluminum, and underneath it all, the indefinable smell of machine and violence. The helicopter was configured for a fast insertion, with no seats, just the cargo floor and the open void of sky beyond the side doors. 8 minutes of flight time, and they would be somewhere in the Laotian jungle, with a 72-hour window to find a missing man and get out alive. The helicopter lurched upward, and Cole felt that familiar sensation of stomach dropping. The rotor pitch changed, and the aircraft seemed to hang in the air for an impossible moment before it began to climb. Beyond the open door, the landscape of South Vietnam fell away. The scarred terrain of the lowlands, the rubber plantations, the areas of dense jungle already consumed by Operation Cedar Falls and Rolling Thunder. Then, after a few minutes of flight, the terrain changed. The landscape ahead became noticeably more forested, more mountainous, the terrain rougher and more vertical. They had crossed into Laos. The area was officially neutral territory, but no one in the helicopter believed that fiction for even a moment. Laos was the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the heart of North Vietnamese operations in Southeast Asia, the place where supplies and soldiers flowed south toward the battlefields of South Vietnam. The insertion was planned for 1,800 hours, but the Kingbees, the ancient CH-34 helicopters that served as the extraction and insertion vehicle for SOG operations, did not arrive at the Kontum airfield until 1835. The delay was never explained. In the world of war and logistics, delays were simply accepted as the cost of maintaining complex operations in a chaotic environment. Cole stood with his team in the shadow of the aircraft parking area, watching the massive helicopters settle onto the tarmac in clouds of dust and blown debris. The twin rotors of the CH-34 were slow, ponderous, and impossibly loud, a sound that carried across kilometers and announced to every listening post in the region that something was about to happen. This was the one moment in a SOG operation where secrecy was impossible. The insertion point had to be reached before the enemy could respond to the sound and position personnel to interdict. Voss adjusted the strap on his ruck and checked his CAR-15 one final time. Marsh clutched the radio battery bag to his chest like it was a living thing that required constant reassurance. Wybam stood with his eyes closed, breathing slowly, his crossbow secured diagonally across his back. Waipa, his younger cousin, carried the M60 machine gun with the kind of casual competence that suggested the weapon weighed nothing at all. Waijan Buonya, the youngest of the Montagnards, bounced slightly on the balls of his feet, nervous energy finding physical expression. "Load in order," Cole said, raising his voice above the rotor noise. "Voss, Marsh, Wybam point, Waipa tail, Waijan center. Minimum talking once we are airborne." "I have gifts for the children," Cole said. He reached into his cargo pocket and withdrew the items he had packed. "But that is not why I came." He handed over the items, and Bam accepted them with a slight smile. Behind him, Cole could see the wife lean forward slightly, her expression shifting from casual attention to something more guarded. She understood that an American officer did not visit the Montagnard quarters to deliver gifts without reason. "We are going out," Cole said in simple English. "Tomorrow morning, insertion in Laos. 3 days in the field, probably. We are bringing a man back, a man who was left behind." Bam studied Cole's face with the patience of a man who had learned to read American expressions as if they were written text. "Yes," he said finally. "I know. The radio speaks of this. Sergeant Langford." "You are willing?" Cole asked. "Always," Bam said. He reached out and placed his hand on Cole's shoulder in a gesture that would have been too familiar if it had come from anyone else. "You are my 10. Where you go, I go. This is the way of it." Cole nodded. He had not expected any other answer, but the explicit affirmation meant something. It meant Bam was accepting the risk not because of orders or because of the salary the American military paid him, but because he understood the obligation of loyalty and the weight of leaving a man behind. Cole turned and walked back toward the fence. Behind him, he could hear Bam speaking to his wife in rapid Jirai, the tones rising and falling with a fluency that the American would never achieve. In the failing light, the compound began to settle into the rhythms of evening. The perimeter guards changed shift. The muzzle flashes in the lowlands beyond Kontum began to intensify, the sounds of the distant battle becoming louder as night approached. Bam Nie stood in the clearing in front of the quarters, tending to a small garden plot. The Montagnard was a small man, perhaps 5'4", with the kind of compact muscularity that came from a lifetime of moving through jungle. At approximately 30 years of age, he was among the oldest of the indigenous soldiers who served with American teams. He had fought during the French Indochina War, had survived the transition to American command, and had developed a partnership with Cole that went beyond the normal boundaries of officer and enlisted, American and indigenous. Bam's wife stood in the doorway of the quarters, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her hands occupied with a small child on her hip. There were other children visible in the interior darkness of the building. Cole had brought gifts for them, small items from the base supply, candy, a notebook, a pen. Bam had saved Cole's life during the first tour, had stepped in front of a burst of machine gun fire that would have killed the American outright. That debt was never fully repaid, and Cole had long ago stopped trying to think of it in those terms. Bam looked up from the garden as Cole approached. He wore civilian clothes, a faded shirt and dark trousers, and a brass bracelet on his left wrist that he never removed. The bracelet had belonged to his father, and his father's father before that. It was a tangible connection to a world that was rapidly disappearing. 10, Bam said in his careful English. His accent was thick, shaping the words with a different architecture of sound. "You come to the family." Marsh sat at the wooden table with his radio frequencies chart spread out in front of him, cross-referencing call signs, frequencies, and transmission protocols. His notebook grew thicker as he wrote, his narrow shoulders hunched over the work. The PRC-25 radio would live on his back for the duration of the operation. 85 pounds of weight, the communication umbilical that connected the team to Firebase Bravo and the air support beyond. Without Marsh and the radio, the team was invisible to the people who could bring artillery and helicopter support down on their position. That meant Marsh was the most important position on the team, even if he was the youngest. Cole moved between the ammunition staging area and the equipment lockers, selecting items with the careful precision of a man building a kit for an operation in darkness. 2 claymore mines went into the ruck, not for offense but for defense, for creating a perimeter around a landing zone if extraction became active. Medical supplies, compression bandages, morphine syringes, tourniquets, the tools of damage control. A fire starting kit, compass, map, notebook, pen, everything that allowed a man to navigate in darkness and make decisions when the radio might not work. In the afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Cole walked out to the Montagnard quarters. The area was separated from the main compound by a single fence, and the buildings here were simpler, wooden structures with palm thatch roofs, designed for the climate and the temporary nature of military housing. The irregular barking of dogs marked Cole's approach, but the animals knew him and did not pursue the alarm beyond initial announcement. The team house fell silent at the mention of Langford. Recon Team Copperhead was not a team Cole had worked directly, but in the world of SOG, all teams were family. The loss of a team leader, the probability that men had been left behind, it was the nightmare scenario that every operator carried with him, waking and sleeping. "Langford," Voss said quietly. He spat into the coffee can. "How solid is the intelligence?" "Solid enough," Cole said. "CIA asset, visual contact, description matches, moving in. A direction consistent with enemy supply operations. We will go in knowing it might be him. We will go out knowing we did everything we could. That is the mission." Voss moved with sudden efficiency, uncurling from the bench in a single fluid motion. Within 5 minutes, Specialist 4th Class Eddie Marsh emerged from the back room, his glasses slipping down his nose as he walked. Marsh was tall and thin, with a nervous energy that manifested in the way his fingers were always moving, tapping on tables, adjusting equipment, writing notes in the leather-bound notebook he carried to track radio frequencies and operational details. He had been on tour for less than 4 months, and the learning curve had been steep, but he had proven himself solid under pressure. "We are going?" Marsh asked, hope and anxiety warring in his voice. "We are going," Cole confirmed. "Full team. I need you to pull the radio battery inventory and make sure we have clean frequencies for the area of operations. Laos insertion, Route 110 sector." Marsh's eyes widened slightly, and his hands found something to do immediately, pulling out his notebook, beginning to write. "Route 110. Copy that. When? 1800 hours insertion. King B will be ready at the airfield by 1700. We will stage there and move to the helicopter zone." Cole moved to the weapons rack along the wall and began a visual inventory of the team's equipment. "Voss, I need you to pull ammunition allocation. Full combat load plus 30% additional. Claymores, frags, the medical kit. Everything configured for rapid movement." "How long in the field?" Voss asked, already moving toward the ammunition storage boxes. 72 hours maximum. Insertion to extraction." Cole's voice carried the calm certainty of a man who had already made the internal calculations and accepted whatever consequence might follow. "We are going after Langford. He was hit in the extraction yesterday morning. CIA has a sighting on Route 110, moving north. The window is narrow. I need to take my team as configured," Cole said finally. "Voss, Marsh, the Montagnards, Y Bam, Y Kpa, and Y John. Nobody else." "Agreed," the colonel said. "You will have full operational command. The decision to go or abort is yours once you are on the ground. If the situation deteriorates beyond acceptable risk, You have my authorization to stand down and extract. That said, I am aware that you do not use that kind of language. I am asking you, as one soldier to another, to be honest with yourself about the risks. Cole stood up from the chair. I will brief the team. We can be ready for insertion at 1800 hours. Will that timeline work? Yes. The colonel extended his hand. You are a good soldier, Cole. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know that. Cole shook the offered hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. The gesture of a man who understood the weight of command and did not seek to diminish it. I will bring him back, sir, or I will bring back his body. That is all any of us can ask. Same as any other operation. You move to the intercept point, you acquire the target. You move to the extraction point, and we bring you out. The colonel, he gestured to the map, will have radio priority. The King Bees will be standing by. The tactical situation is fluid, but those are the parameters. It is not a perfect situation, Sergeant, but it is the only situation we have. Cole looked at the map. He traced the route from the insertion point to the probable intercept area. The distance was roughly 14 kilometers through jungle terrain. The terrain showed elevation changes, valleys and ridgelines, all of it covered in triple canopy jungle. The enemy had owned this ground for years. They knew it better than they knew their own compounds. How many days? Cole asked. You would insert at last light today. You would have until end of day, 72 hours from insertion, to locate and extract the target. If you do not have him by then, you abort and come out. Those are the hard parameters. The colonel's voice carried the weight of a man speaking words he did not believe in, but was obligated to speak. I will not lie to you, Cole. This is a difficult operation. The intelligence is fragmentary. The area is hot. The window is narrow. Cole sat in silence for a long moment. In his mind, he was already calculating firing distances, avenues of approach, contingency routes. His team had trained for exactly this scenario: deep insertion, navigation through enemy territory, location of a target, extraction under fire. They had trained for it, but training and reality were different beasts. Training did not include the sound of a man's last breath. Training did not include the weight of a body across your shoulders as you ran through darkness toward a landing zone that may or may not appear. Cole leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed, but his expression remained neutral. Langford? Probable. The height, the build, the hair color. It is Langford or someone very similar. The colonel returned to his position at the head of the table. We have a 72-hour window before we lose him. After that, he moves deeper into Laos, or he moves north to Hanoi, and he stops being a recoverable asset. The NVA is moving him north on the trail, Route 110. They may be trying to get him to a more secure holding point, or they may be moving him toward the north. Either way, once he crosses into heavy NVA rear echelon territory, we do not get him back. Cole's jaw tightened slightly, a small movement that would have been invisible to someone who did not know to look for it. We do not know for certain it is him. No, the colonel agreed. We do not. The asset was reporting from a distance, in poor light, and the intelligence is 3 hours old, but it is the best lead we have. He studied Cole with the intensity of a man trying to read something written in a language he did not speak. I need to know if you are willing to go. The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Cole understood what it meant. Route 110 was deep in Indian country. The extraction would have to be conducted from an area of active NVA supply movement. If the rescue went bad, if the team was hit and pinned, there would be very little support available. The Tet Offensive was consuming air assets. The tactical situation in South Vietnam was chaos. A rescue operation in Laos would be a low-priority extraction. If we recover him, Cole said slowly, what is the extraction methodology? Cole nodded. He fitted the boonie hat onto his head, the brim settling low over his eyes, and followed Morrison across the compound toward the concrete block briefing room. Behind them, the sounds of the distant battle continued their irregular rhythm, a reminder that the world beyond the wire was still burning. Recon Team Copperhead was hit in Laos yesterday morning, the colonel said. His voice was steady, factual, stripped of emotion. Area around Tchepone. They were on a 3-day patrol, monitoring supply activity on the trail. They made contact with the North Vietnamese Army Reaction Force. The team broke contact and moved to their extraction point. The Kingbees went in at last light. He turned away from the map and looked directly at Cole. Copperhead got out, except for the team leader. Cole did not blink. Staff Sergeant Langford? Yes. The colonel walked back to the table and placed both hands on its edge. The extraction was hot. The helicopters had to move faster than they should have. Langford was coming up the rope with 2 of his Montagnards when one of the helicopters took fire in the tail rotor. The pilot had to clear out immediately. When the smoke cleared and the birds got back, Langford and 3 of the indigenous troops were gone. We assume KIA until proven otherwise. But we received a signal from a CIA asset in the area about 3 hours ago. The colonel reached into a manila folder on the table and withdrew a single photograph. It showed a tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair and a thin face. The photograph was military personnel file quality, taken under institutional light. An American matching Langford's description was seen by the asset, moving north along Route 110 with what looked like an NVA escort. The asset says the man was walking, apparently under his own power. He was alive, at least as of 16 hours ago. Cole had been on 2 tours before this one. The first had taught him what he could do. The second had taught him what it cost. Now, in his 27th year, he possessed the quiet efficiency of a man who had learned to separate the action from the consequence, at least until the evening, when he lay awake in the darkness and let the consequences catch up. His deep-set eyes, weathered from the sun and smoke, did not look up from the rifle components. The worn boonie hat hung on a wooden peg beside him, bleached gray by the tropical sun. It bore no insignia, no rank, nothing to mark him. That was intentional. In the world Cole inhabited, invisibility was the first virtue. He fitted the bolt carrier into the receiver with a soft, metallic snick. The weapon reassembled itself under his hands like a prayer he no longer needed to speak aloud. He was so absorbed in the work that he did not immediately register the footsteps crossing the porch behind him. 1-0. The voice belonged to Sergeant First Class Morrison, the operations officer. It was professional, careful, the way military men speak when they are about to change someone's evening. Cole did not turn around. He fitted the charging handle into place and tested the travel of the bolt. Smooth. Sir, Colonel wants to see you. Briefing room, now. Cole completed one final inspection of the rifle, checked that each component was properly seated, and laid the weapon aside on the tarp. He moved with deliberate slowness, the way a man moves when he is preparing himself for news he has already begun to suspect. He rose from the wooden chair, picked up his hat, and turned to look at Morrison. The sergeant's face was set in that particular expression of forced neutrality that always meant something bad. The others? Cole asked. Stand by. You first. The afternoon sun filtered through the rubber trees in bands of amber and shadow. In the lowlands beyond Kontum, the sounds of the Tet Offensive echoed in the distance. The deep percussion of artillery, the irregular staccato of small arms fire, the whump of helicopter rotors that came and went like the pulse of something dying. But here, at the CCC compound, the silence was almost worse. The compound sat quiet and tense, the way a man holds his breath before a fall. Nathan Cole sat on the wooden porch of the team house, his CAR-15 broken down in front of him on a green field-stripping tarp. The weapon lay in its components: barrel, bolt carrier, receiver, each piece reflecting the late afternoon light. His hands moved through the routine with the methodical grace of a man who had cleaned this particular rifle perhaps 500 times before. He pulled the charging handle assembly free, set it aside, and reached for the bore brush. The small brass cylinder caught the light as he held it up to the sun, inspecting it with the kind of attention another man might give to a piece of jewelry. Around him, the compound hummed with the activity of organized alertness. The officers' quarters lay to the east, where the radio operators monitored the traffic from the lowlands. To the north, the ammunition magazines stood behind sandbag barriers. The Montagnard quarters sat beyond the perimeter fence, a cluster of smaller buildings where the indigenous troops and their families lived in the shadow of American power. It was a strange microcosm of war, a place where men prepared for death while trying not to think about it. MACV-SOG, Bright Light. Segment 2, The Trail. Behind them, the Ho Chi Minh Trail continues its work, moving trucks and soldiers and supplies south, a river of war that cannot be stopped, only observed and reported. The team has done what they came to do. They have found the prisoner. They have extracted him. Now they must survive the last few hundred meters. But they need to survive too. The NVA will be searching. Trail patrols will be increased. The helicopter extraction point is still 2 kilometers away. Moving at night through unfamiliar terrain is dangerous. But moving in daylight, when the NVA can organize and search, is more dangerous. Cole signals. Hold position until first light. 1 hour rest, then move to extraction. The team settles into a defensive perimeter. Y-BAM takes the first watch. Y-Panye settles the M60 into a position of mutual support with the other weapons. Y-John Buon Ya sits beside Langford, holding a cloth soaked with water to them. Officer's forehead, trying to reduce the fever's terrible heat. Voss checks his ammunition. 2 magazines left for the CAR-15. The M79 is out of rounds, all expended, covering the extraction. He is carrying 40 rounds in magazines, enough to suppress enemy fire if the NVA finds them before dawn, but not enough for a sustained engagement. Cole makes a decision. They will move immediately, not toward the extraction point, but toward the ridgetop. Higher ground, better fields of fire. If the NVA finds them, they will have positions of advantage. They move again. Langford is more conscious now, the fever seeming to crest and then fall slightly. He asks where he is. Cole tells him they are going home. The officer does not respond, but his hand grips Cole's uniform, holding tight. The desperation in that grip is absolute. Months of captivity have worn away everything except the need to survive. Before dawn, they reach the ridgetop. The triple canopy forest ends here, giving way to a slightly more open area where the wind moves the vegetation, where the stars are visible above. Cole can see the North Star. He can see the Southern Cross. He can see the vast canopy stretching away in every direction, beneath them, around them, above them. The jungle has no edges here. It simply extends forever. They move north and west, away from the trail, climbing back toward the ridgeline they descended from. Cole half carries, half drags Langford. The officer slips in and out of consciousness, sometimes helping his own movement, sometimes dead weight. The temperature of his skin is burning hot. The fever is dangerous, is burning through his system. Cole can feel the weight of it, the understanding that this man might die not from bullets, but from infection, from the jungle's invisible enemy. Behind them, the sound of the trail fades. The jungle closes back in. Insects and birds resume their songs. The shooting stops. The men are either regrouping or sweeping in behind them, ready to pursue. Cole does not look back. He focuses on movement, on distance, on the compass bearing that will take them away from the corridor and toward the extraction point they were given. Marsh pulls out the radio. "Bright light 7 to bright light actual," he says, his voice breathless. 10 station. Package extracted. Objective secured. 10 has casualty. Serious medical. Request immediate medical evacuation. Northern coordinates. He reads the coordinates, their location, their heading. The response comes back almost immediately. Help is on the way. They move through the night. The Montagnards alternate point and tail. The Americans take turns supporting Langford's weight. The officer drifts in fever dreams, sometimes calling out names, sometimes coherent enough to understand he is moving toward safety. Around midnight, YBAM stops the patrol. They have reached another ridgeline, this one even more remote than the first. The point man's hand signals indicate rest, but minimal. Cole checks Langford's wound. The fever is intense. They need to move. Y Pagne's M60 opens up now. The machine gun is not suppressed, and its roar is like thunder in the jungle. The NVA soldiers taking cover near the trucks are scythed down by the concentrated fire, their bodies jerking and falling. Y John Buon Ya's grenade launcher adds another explosion near the shelter, and the tarp collapses, the medical equipment scattering like broken toys. "Move," Cole gasps. He pulls Langford toward the tree line, back toward the positions where the team can consolidate. Voss runs beside him, the M79 reloaded, his freckled face twisted with concentration. Behind them, the trail is chaos. The truck explosion continues to burn. NVA soldiers are shouting, organizing, returning fire. More weapons are materializing from the trucks and bunker positions. Within seconds, the isolated action will become a full engagement. They reach the dense vegetation, and Cole pulls Langford down behind a fallen log. The officer is making small sounds of pain, his consciousness fading again. Cole checks the wound. The bullet has gone through the shoulder, clean entry and exit. No major vessels compromised. Not fatal, but bleeding, and the man is fevered from infection already. Survival now depends on speed and distance. "Rally point," Cole calls out. The team consolidates quickly. YBAM appears from the vegetation, moving with the same silent grace he brought to the opening movement. Y Pagne abandons the M60 position, moving his massive form through the jungle with surprising speed. Y John Buon Ya brings up the rear, his young face wide with adrenaline, the M79 ready for any contact. The NVA are organizing. More soldiers are moving in their direction. Cole can hear the shouted commands, the sounds of a military organization responding to a threat. The trail watchers who failed to check in will now be explained by the captured prisoner and the team's presence. The entire region will be alerted. Cole runs. His legs pump beneath him, the CAR-15 held at high ready, and he covers the 20 meters to the shelter in seconds that feel like hours. An NVA soldier is raising his rifle. Cole's first shot takes him in the chest. The second round, not necessary. A medical officer is frozen, staring at Cole with an expression of absolute bewilderment. Cole does not shoot. He does not have time. "Langford," he shouts, "can you move?" The American officer's eyes flutter open. They are fever-bright, delirious. "Water," he croaks. "Need water." He is not conscious enough to understand he is being rescued. Cole hears the first NVA. "Return fire now." Bullets are snapping through the trees, the unmistakable crack of AK-47 rounds. Voss is returning fire with his launcher, another grenade arcing toward the truck park, and the explosion there sends soldiers scattering. Y-BAM's crossbow fires again. Another soldier drops. The return fire increases. More voices shouting. More weapons firing. Cole grabs Langford under one arm. The POW is light. Too light. His body wasted by months of captivity and now illness. Cole drags him from the shelter. A bullet passes so close, Cole feels the air move. Another finds Langford's shoulder, and the officer screams, a sound of pure pain that cuts through the chaos. Marsh is providing covering fire, his CAR-15 speaking in controlled bursts. The suppressed fire is barely audible under the roar of the NVA weapons and the grenades. Voss fires another round. The truck nearest to them explodes, ammunition inside, ignited by the grenade's force. The explosion is massive, the fireball rising above the canopy, and for a moment, the entire trail corridor is revealed in the bright light. "Okay," Cole whispers, "on my signal." He checks his weapon. 2 magazines remaining plus the one in the rifle. 30 rounds. Voss has 3 magazines for the M79. Y-BAM has 4 bolts remaining in his quiver. The Montagnards will provide suppressive fire from elevated positions. The mathematics of the situation are terrible. Y-BAM moves first. He ghosts through the vegetation, placing himself on a rise that gives a clear sightline toward the prisoner column position. His position is covered by heavy vegetation and dead logs. When he is set, signals. Y Pan Nye and Y John Buon Ya move next, taking positions that create a crossfire situation. Their fields of fire are prepared. Their magazines are checked. When the shooting starts, they will deliver absolute violence. Cole waits for exactly 9 minutes. Then he signals. Y-BAM fires his crossbow. The bolt leaves the string and travels the 20 meters to the sheltered position with terrible accuracy. An NVA soldier drops, the bolt through his throat. The sound is the smallest whisper of sound in the vast jungle, but the alarm on the man's face as he falls is absolute. Voss fires the M79. The 40mm grenade arcs through the air and lands near the sheltered area with a sound like heavy rain on a tin roof. The explosion is not huge. The round is sized for area effect, not destruction. But in the confined space of the shelter, the percussion and fragments are devastating. An NVA soldier staggers backward, his uniform torn, his face painted with blood. Marsh is already firing his CAR-15 in precise 2-round bursts. Cole makes a quick count. 12 NVA soldiers visible, 2 medical personnel, 4 prisoners, 3 Vietnamese, 1 American. The American is Langford. Even from this distance, Cole can see the bandages, the way the man is not moving. He is unconscious, or nearly so. The fever that killed him in the radio report is making him a burden. The medical personnel are trying to keep him alive, but the resources are minimal. If they do not move him to a proper medical facility soon, he will die. Cole signals, "Marsh." The radio operator crawls forward, keeping behind the dense vegetation. Cole whispers the situation. Marsh nods. "They cannot stay there long," the radio operator says. "The trail watchers will complete their patrol. When they miss their check-in..." He does not finish the sentence. They both know what happens. "How long until the alarm?" Cole asks. Marsh checks his watch. 18 minutes, maybe 20. Cole thinks. The team cannot hit the position from here. The distance is too great for effective suppressed fire, and any shots that miss or fail to eliminate all targets will alert the entire trail corridor to their presence. They cannot risk calling in air support. The POW is within the blast radius. They cannot approach directly. There are too many armed enemy soldiers. Unless... Cole has an idea. It is a terrible idea, but it is an idea. He gathers YBAM and Voss with hand signals. He whispers the plan. YBAM's face does not change. Voss's jaw tightens slightly. Neither man speaks. They understand the risks. They understand that what Cole is proposing is suicide if anything goes wrong. Cole processes this. An injured prisoner, slowed by fever or infection or wound complications, becoming a liability. The NVA medical personnel will do what they can, but out here, with limited supplies, the outcome is questionable. Langford might die before they reach him. The entire mission might hinge on reaching him in time. But slowing down means the column is more predictable. A slower target is easier to intercept. Cole signals YBAM. The point man alters course slightly, moving more deliberately, using vegetation to mask their movement while increasing speed. The ridgeline is becoming less defined. They are descending into the valley where the trail runs. Sounds rise up from below now. Voices. Not many, not close, but definitely human voices. The clank of equipment. The sound of trucks in the distance, their engines carrying through the humid air. The patrol is descending directly toward the trail corridor, and the risk of discovery increases exponentially with every meter they descend. YBAM stops at a dense thicket of vegetation. He gestures for the team to take defensive positions. Cole moves up beside him. Through the vegetation, he can see the trail again. A truck park is visible here, larger than the first one they spotted. 3 trucks are parked, their canopies off, mechanics or engineers working on the engines. Further down the trail, soldiers are constructing some kind of structure, a bunker perhaps, or a storage shelter. But it is what is off the main trail that catches Cole's attention. A small, sheltered area has been created in a depression 20 meters off the road. A canvas tarp has been strung between 2 trees. Beneath it, figures are visible. Neva soldiers, yes, but also something else. A man in tattered American uniform, lying on what appears to be a makeshift stretcher. Other figures moving around him with the deliberation of medical personnel. The prisoner column. "Move," Cole says, his voice barely above a whisper. The team consolidates immediately. YBAM heads down slope toward the trail corridor, moving parallel to it but staying well above. Cole keeps visual contact with the point man through binoculars. Behind him, Voss moves with practiced efficiency, his weapon ready. Marsh keeps the radio close, antenna still taped down. The Montagnards move like ghosts, their knowledge of jungle warfare absolute and instinctive. Time becomes the enemy now. Every minute that passes brings the 2-hour patrol check-in closer. When the trail watchers do not report, an alert will go out. The entire corridor will be searched. Patrols will increase. The air above will fill with helicopters if the NVA chooses to call for them. The team has minutes, perhaps less, to move through the trail area and locate the prisoner column before the alarm goes up. They move for 40 minutes at a pace that tears at the lungs. Jungle movement at speed is not like walking. Every step must be tested before weight is committed. Every branch must be placed aside carefully to avoid noise. But speed is essential. Cole can feel the pressure of time like a physical thing, like the weight of water pressing down. Sweat soaks his uniform now, the salt stinging his eyes. His thighs burn. His lungs burn. Then Marsh hisses softly. Cole raises his hand, and the patrol freezes. The radio operator holds the headset to his ear, his face concentrating intensely. He makes notes on a small, waterproof pad. When he pulls the headset away, his eyes are wide. "Sir," he whispers, "intercept. Prisoner column radio traffic. They report medical emergency. Langford is deteriorating. They are slowing down, moving to find shelter." YBAM moves with absolute silence. His crossbow is drawn, the string taut, the bolt knocked and ready. The closest trail watcher is 10 meters away when the old Montagnard rises. The bolt leaves the crossbow with barely a whisper of sound. The NVA soldier makes a noise, not a scream, barely a gasp, and drops. One moment he is alive, moving through the jungle. The next moment he is still, the bolt deep in his chest. The other 2 soldiers react. One reaches for his radio. Voss fires. The suppressed shot from his CAR-15 is barely louder than a cough. The soldier falls. The third one begins to move, begins to run. Cole rises and fires. 3 shots, controlled, aimed. The trail watcher drops 10 meters away, his rifle clattering to the ground. Silence returns. The jungle, for a moment, seems to hold its breath. Then the ambient sounds resume. The insects, the birds, the dripping water from the canopy. As if the 3 killings did not occur. As if 3 North Vietnamese soldiers did not just die here on this ridgetop. YBAM is already moving to recover the bolt. He retrieves it from the first soldier's chest and wipes it clean on the dead man's uniform. His face shows no expression. Cole checks the other bodies quickly. No communication devices beyond the dead man's rifle. No radio. That is good. That means the patrol was not expected to check in immediately. But that will change. Standard NVA patrol protocol requires a check-in every 2 hours. When these men do not report, the trail will be alerted. Voss touches his arm. The 1-1 points northeast, back along the ridge. 3 figures are moving through the forest, approaching their position. Trail watchers. Cole makes an immediate decision. The prisoner column is confirmed, moving south. The insertion point is compromised if they remain on the ridge. The team must move to intercept. He touches YBAM's arm, makes quick hand signals. The Montagnard point man nods. He understands. His hand moves downslope, indicating the direction. They will move parallel to the trail, staying above it, using the ridgeline for movement until they can intercept the prisoner column before it reaches whatever holding area lies ahead. But first, The trail watchers approaching from the northeast must not reach the ridgetop and find the team's position. Cole moves back to Voss, whispers the plan. The 1-1 nods. He understands. The M79 launcher is positioned, angled to cover the three approaching figures when they clear the tree line. Ijan Boigna, the young grenadier, moves to flank the approaching patrol. His movements are absolutely silent. Cole watches the Montagnard disappear into the vegetation and feels a moment of something like awe. This young man cannot be more than 19 years old, and he moves through dense jungle like water finding its level. The trail watchers emerge from the tree line. They are NVA regulars, carrying AK-47s, alert but not expecting immediate contact. Their pattern is clear. They have done this patrol 100 times. They move down the ridge toward the fallen tree where Cole and YBAM are positioned. There, Voss whispers. He points with the barrel of his M79. A group of soldiers is moving differently than the others. They are not marching in military formation. Some are being supported by others. A stretcher is visible, carried by 4 men. Behind them, other soldiers walk carefully, movements suggesting injury or exhaustion. Cole's heart rate increases. He reaches for the binoculars hanging around his neck. The stretcher passes through a shaft of light. Cole focuses. The man on it is thin, almost skeletal. His skin is pale beneath the dirt. His arm, visible even at this distance, is wrapped in what appears to be fabric. Around the stretcher, soldiers move with the careful deliberation of men protecting something precious. Cole scans the other soldiers in the group. One of them is taller, moving stiffly, one arm held against his body. American height, American build. Langford, Cole breathes. It is not a question. The intelligence briefing contained photographs. Cole has memorized Langford's height, the particular way he moved before he was captured. The figure below matches. Marsh is already reaching for the radio. No, Cole says, his voice barely audible. Not yet. We need confirmation. We need to see where they are going. The prisoner column continues moving south, deeper into the trail corridor. Cole watches them disappear into a section of denser vegetation. He notes the time, 12:47 hours. He notes their direction, deeper into Laos. He notes the composition, NVA, security force of at least 12 soldiers, multiple prisoners, including what appears to be Langford, medical personnel, standard rifle equipment. Marsh settles onto his belly, keeping the antenna taped down to minimize silhouette. His fingers move across the radio dial, setting frequency. There is the soft hiss of the handset when he transmits. His voice is controlled, measured, no inflection. Bright light 7 to bright light actual. 10 station, in position. Corridor active. Heavy truck traffic, confirmed soldiers. Logistics infrastructure observed. No prisoner column located yet. Patrol assumes observation posture. Send. There is static, then a crackle that might be reception, or might be nothing. The response comes back garbled. Marsh presses the handset tighter to his ear. Roger. Understand supplies moving south. No compromise. Bright light 7 out. He slides the radio off transmission frequency and looks at Cole. The message from Camp Eagle was brief. Something about supply movements being confirmed by the B3 Front Command headquarters and to maintain observation. The patrol waits. Time becomes elastic in the jungle. An hour passes. Then 2. The sun climbs higher, and the green dappled light becomes more defined as the canopy overhead filters the rays into individual shafts. The heat increases. Sweat soaks Cole's uniform. He can see it darkening Voss's shirt, but neither man moves. The Montagnards do not visibly sweat. Their bodies have adapted to this climate over generations. The column of bicycles continues below them. The trucks continue. The soldiers continue. Cole begins to recognize patterns. There are different types of trucks, some carrying supplies, others apparently empty, heading north. The soldiers move in regular intervals, fresh units appearing every 30 minutes or so. The trail watchers, he finally spots them, appear every couple of hours. Small patrols of 2 or 3 men moving along the corridor's edge, checking for signs of interference, then disappearing again. Wybam's voice is barely a whisper. Soldiers. Many soldiers. Cole nods. His mind is calculating. The bright light briefing indicated the prisoner column would be somewhere within this corridor, moving south along the trail toward a holding area near the Cambodian border. What the briefing did not fully convey is the reality of moving through that corridor. The prisoner column is not somewhere hidden. It is moving through this army. Cole touches Voss's arm. The 1-1 moves up beside him, settling into position. Voss exhales slowly. "Holy Mother of God," he whispers. Cole does not respond. He is already thinking operationally. The observation point provides clear sight lines along approximately 300 meters of corridor. They can remain here and observe, watching for the prisoner column as it passes. The risk is that any number of NVA patrols could use this same ridge. The odds of being discovered are high. Marsh appears at his other elbow, moving with surprising quietness. The radio operator's face is pale. "Sir," he whispers, "should I establish comms?" Cole considers. The PRC-25 is encrypted, but the NVA has direction-finding equipment. If Marsh transmits from this exposed ridge, there is a possibility of detection. Against that is the necessity of informing Camp Eagle that they have reached the trail and begun observation. "Make it brief," Cole whispers. "Situation report only." Between the trucks move soldiers, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, moving in organized columns, separated into platoon-sized elements. Cole recognizes the uniform, NVA regulars, not Viet Cong militia. These are troops from North Vietnam, moving south along the trail. Their helmets catch the light. Their rifles are slung, but their officers, walking alongside, carry pistols at the ready. They are a military force, organized and disciplined. Some of the soldiers carry hammocks bundled on their backs. They will sleep in the jungle and wake tomorrow to keep walking. But that is not all. Bicycles. The first thing that strikes Cole is the sheer number of bicycles. These are not civilian bicycles. They are heavy-framed, reinforced, designed to carry load. Each one is laden: crates of ammunition, sealed containers, water cans, fuel cans. The bicycles are pushed by North Vietnamese soldiers, and the columns of bicycles stretch away downslope until they disappear into the haze of dust and dead distance. Cole realizes he is counting and stops. There are too many. Counting is impossible. Off the main corridor, hidden in the deep shadows under the tallest trees, Cole sees structures. Simple things: a corrugated metal roof, no walls, open on all sides. A truck park. Vehicles parked at angles, their engines dark, their crews invisible. Another structure, larger, more permanent, with what appears to be bunker embrasures dug into the slope below. An aid station. A hospital. The NVA does not simply move supplies down the trail. They inhabit it. They have made it theirs. They move for another hour. The ridge becomes steeper. Vegetation changes. Less grass, more ferns. Trees with straighter trunks, fighting for space in the canopy above. A ridgetop appears ahead. Wybam slows. His hand signals, observation point. The patrol consolidates, moving into a defensive position 50 meters from the ridge crest, weapons covering all approaches. Cole and Voss take positions on the right flank. The Montagnards form a loose semicircle, Wykpanier placed so that the M60 has clear fields of fire downslope. Cole moves up to Wybam's position, crouching behind a fallen tree. The old Montagnard does not move, does not acknowledge. He simply waits. Cole lowers himself slowly, pressing his body against the earth. Mud and leaf litter stick to his uniform. The smell of the ground, petrichor and decay, fills his nostrils. He waits for his eyes to adjust. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then Wybam inches forward. Below them lies the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Cole's breath catches. His mind cannot immediately process what his eyes are seeing. It is not a trail. A trail is a path worn through the forest by the passage of men and animals. What lies below them is a highway. The canopy above stretches unbroken, ancient and complete. But beneath it, the ground has been cleared, not all the way to bare earth, but cleared. Vegetation suppressed. And running through that corridor, visible in the green dappled light, is a river of vehicles and men. Trucks. Trucks moving bumper to bumper down the corridor, some pointing north, some south. Military trucks, their canvas canopies so faded that the olive green has become almost invisible in the foliage. Cole can see perhaps 20 in the immediate view, but the corridor extends beyond sight in both directions. Dust rises from their wheels, caught in the slanting light. The dust should not exist in this wet climate, but the volume of traffic has worn the road down to exposed earth. The jungle smells like death and growth. Rot rises from the forest floor, decades of fallen leaves returning to earth. Tree bark moldering in the perpetual dampness, insects and fungi consuming the dead. Beneath that is the green smell, sap, growing things, the almost suffocating richness of life pressing in from every direction. Cole has learned to read that smell. When it changes, something is different. The jungle tells you what it knows if you listen. Wybam stops. His hand rises, fingers spread. Immediate silence. The patrol freezes. 6 men suspended in the gray light, each aware that sound carries differently here than in open country. A whispered word in this place could travel 300 meters. Voss shifts his weight to his right foot. Wykpanier scans the trail behind. The only movement is the slow descent of moisture from the canopy above, the jungle's constant, invisible rain. Wybam moves again. 5 meters. 10. The terrain slopes downward toward the east, and Cole realizes they are descending toward a ridgeline. His compass reads 270, bearing southeast. According to his map, Route 110 lies 2 kilometers ahead, following the valley. The trail under their feet has become more defined, boot prints, some fresh, others days old. An NVA supply column has passed this way, perhaps more than one. The light grows incrementally. The darkness above them remains, but the forest floor becomes visible. Shades of brown and gray emerge from black. Cole can see Voss's face now, the dark freckles across his nose, the set of his jaw. Behind them, Marsh's glasses reflect light. The radio is still silent. That will change soon. The pre-dawn darkness pressed against Cole like something alive and breathing. He lay on his belly atop a ridge that overlooked a narrow clearing 200 meters below. Through the starlight scope mounted on his CAR-15, the world became a shade of green. Everything flat, everything visible, everything real. The clearing held what they had been hunting for 5 days. A small stream cut through the center, and beside it, arranged in a rough semicircle, were the NVA positions. Roughly 20 soldiers, some sleeping, some awake with rifles held slack across their chests. And in the center, a bamboo structure. Not quite a cage, not quite a hut. Something built in haste and designed for holding. Cole studied it. The walls were lashed with strips of bark and wire. One small opening faced the stream. Inside that opening, though Cole could not quite make out the shape, was Sergeant Tom Langford. Was being the operative word. They had no confirmation he was still alive, only intelligence from a Montagnard patrol 2 days prior. Only the word of a man who had seen a prisoner, barely conscious, being force-marched at dawn. Intelligence was a small and fragile thing. It broke easily. It bent under its own weight. Cole lowered the scope and turned his head. To his left, Bam Ni lay prone with his own rifle, the crossbow, ancient, beautiful, lethal, strapped to his back. The Jirai man was entirely still, not the stillness of sleep, the stillness of absolute presence. His dark eyes fixed on the clearing with the concentration of a predator that has spotted its prey and now simply waits. Behind them, positioned along the ridgeline in a carefully measured spacing, were the others. Kpa Ni occupied the high point to the northeast, his M60 already aimed at the far side of the clearing, where NVA would seek escape. Sergeant Danny Voss crouched 50 meters back, cradling his M79 grenade launcher like it was the most precious thing he owned. Eddie Marsh, the radio operator, was 5 meters behind Voss. The PRC-25 was already set to battalion frequency, and young Y. John Buon Ya, barely 20, all energy and eagerness, was positioned on the southern flank with his own M79 and a bag of grenades that he had been checking and rechecking for the past hour. The boy wanted to prove something. Cole understood that. He had been that once, a lifetime ago. The claymores had taken 40 minutes to position. Cole had done it himself, moving alone through the darkness, feeling each step with the sole of his boot before trusting his weight to it. 8 mines, 4 on the western approach, 2 on the southern trail, 1 on each flank. 8 small rectangles of molded explosive with tripwires that ran back to the ridge positions where Yuka and Voss could trigger them if necessary. Or not. Claymores were democratic things. They did not discriminate between friend and foe. They killed whoever stood in front of them. The time had shifted past 4:30 hours. Around them, the jungle was beginning to whisper, not speech. The whisper of things waking, birds, insects, the small sounds of nocturnal creatures retreating to day holes. Dawn was perhaps 40 minutes away. The guard change would come with the light. The NVA preferred clarity for that ritual, standing down sentries, positioning new ones, a moment of movement and distraction. Cole had chosen this time because it was good, not because it was perfect. Perfection did not exist in combat. He spoke into his throat mic, barely above a whisper. The word came out as a breath. "All teams, sound off." 1-1 in position, Voss responded. "South position secure," Y. John called. 1-2 is ready, Eddie said. The radio operator's voice was light and steady. Why Kapa does not need to speak. His position was confirmed by observation. Cole nodded, though no one could see him. They had been together as a team for 9 months. 9 months of operations, small insertions, quick raids, intelligence gathering, prisoner snatches, reconnaissance. They had lost no one. In MACV-SOG, that was exceptional. That was blessed. Cole did not believe in luck. He believed in preparation. He believed in knowing the ground. He believed in silence and patience, and the absolute clarity that came when you understood what you were about to do and why. He did not believe in luck, but he believed in this team. The waiting was the worst part. Cole had learned that early in his career. The moment before action. The moment when all preparation dissolved and there was only the future. And the future was a thing that had not yet happened. Unknown. Unknowable. He watched the clearing. The NVA moved. One man went to the stream and knelt and drank. Another relieved a sentry. The prisoner hut remained still. Cole found himself thinking about Langford. He had never met the man. Major Harker had briefed him on the basics. Sergeant Thomas Langford, intelligence officer, attached to an LLDB advisory team. Captured 14 days prior when his convoy was ambushed near Mahachai. Presumed beaten. Presumed interrogated. Presumed likely to be moved north within the week. The command had been clear. Retrieve him. Retrieve him at all costs except the cost of the team. Cole understood that calculus. It was the mathematics of war. 1 man against 6 was still 1 man. The first light came gray and uncertain, not yet true dawn. The liminal space between night and day, when the world was painted only in shades of ash. And then the guard change began. Cole watched it through his scope. NVA sergeant moving through the positions, tapping men on the shoulder, shouting low commands that Cole could not hear but could read in body language. Men standing, rifles being adjusted. A small shift in how they arranged themselves around the perimeter. Cole's breathing slowed. He had learned to do this years ago, to slow his heart, to narrow his attention to only what mattered, to become something other than a human being, a mechanism, a tool, a thing without fear. Now, he whispered. He pressed the detonator button. The Western claymores blew first, a flat, hard crack that was not quite an explosion. Claymores did not explode. They were not grenades. They detonated. They pushed. 700 steel pellets moving at lethal velocity. The NVA soldier closest to the detonation simply fell. His body reacted to the physics. It did not matter what his mind wanted. YPA's M60 opened up immediately. Long bursts, disciplined fire. The Montagnard man did not waste ammunition. He fired in bursts of 6, then paused, then fired again. Targeting movement, targeting position, targeting anything that was not Cole or the team. Danny Voss sent the first grenade up with his M79. A perfect arc. It came down inside the second NVA cluster and detonated with a dull whump. Dirt and smoke and the sound of men screaming. The clearing was transforming. In 10 seconds it had changed from an ordered military camp into something that resembled chaos, that resembled panic, that resembled the moment when professional soldiers realized they were being attacked and did not know from where. Cole was already moving, Y-BAM beside him. Not beside exactly, 2 meters forward and to the left, where the Jarai point man could see threats before they developed into problems. They ran down the slope in a controlled rush, not fast. Fast was sloppy. Fast got you killed. Controlled. measured, purposeful. The prisoner hut was 60 meters away. Cole measured the distance in strides. His CAR-15 was up. His eyes were tracking. Wybam's crossbow was in his hand, though he did not fire it. The bow was for situations that required silence. This situation required speed. A rifle cracked from somewhere in the smoke. Cole felt the round pass. Not felt it hit. Felt the passage, the air displacement, the particular scream of a bullet moving faster than thought. He did not flinch. He did not change pace. He ran. Wybam reached the hut first. The Jarai man was smaller than Cole, but fast, efficient. He did not stop at the opening. He went straight through it, and Cole heard the sharp sound of his CAR-15 firing once, a single round. Then silence. Then Wybam emerged, dragging something. Someone. A man. Barely a man. The NVA had worked him over thoroughly. One eye was swollen completely shut. The other was open and wild. His face was a map of bruises, some fresh, some old enough to have begun turning from purple to yellow. His ribs were visible beneath torn fatigues. He looked like something that had been hammered and left in the sun. And when he saw Cole, he smiled. A broken smile. A smile with teeth missing. A smile that somehow contained defiance and humor and a terrible relief. "Took you long enough," he said. His voice was gravel and broken glass. Cole had no time for conversation. He drew his knife, a small blade, sharp enough to cut through wire, and cut the bonds around Langford's wrists. The wire had been twisted tight. It had left deep marks. Langford's hands, when freed, simply hung at his sides for a moment, as if he could not remember what they were for. "Move," Cole said. It was not a suggestion. Wybam had already lifted the prisoner. The Montagnard's slight frame bore no indication of strain, though Langford outweighed him by perhaps 40 pounds. Wybam simply carried him like a man carries something precious. They turned upslope. Behind them, the clearing was still a landscape of noise and violence. YKPA's M60 continued its grinding conversation. Voss sent another grenade into what remained of an NVA position. Y. John's M79 cracked twice in rapid succession. But around them, scattered through the jungle at the clearing's edge, NVA soldiers were organizing. The shock of the initial assault was wearing off. Discipline was returning. And they were beginning to realize where the attack was coming from. The trail back to the ridge was the most exposed part. Open, visible. 50 meters of relative clarity where an enemy could track a moving target and have reasonable confidence of hitting it. Cole had calculated this in the planning. It was unavoidable. Every operation had its moment of maximum danger. This was theirs. He moved to Langford's other side. Wybam had the prisoner's arm around his shoulders, bearing most of the weight. Langford could not walk properly. One leg was injured. Cole could see the drag, the way Langford favored the right side. They went upslope at a pace that was controlled and careful and far too slow. A rifle fired from somewhere to the south. Then another. The bullets passed overhead. High. The NVA soldiers were shooting without clear sight lines, which was good. Panic shooting. Cole looked back and saw Wyjon Buon Ya at the southern position, his slim figure silhouetted against the smoke. The grenadier was laying down suppressing fire, his M79 sending rounds in that particular high arc that made them look slow and dreamlike when they came down. Cole saw the moment when the NVA soldier fired, the muzzle flash from the jungle. The moment of consequence. The moment that changed everything. John went backward, not falling, pushed backward by the impact. His body jerked like something operated by strings, and then he was on the ground, and his rifle was in the air, turning in a slow arc. And when it came down, it landed across the rocks beside him. Cole wanted to stop. Every instinct in his body demanded that he stop, that he go back, that he retrieve the young Montagnard who had checked his grenades over and over and been so eager to prove himself. But Danny Voss was already moving. The sergeant had seen it from his position. Voss was running toward John, and the fire from the jungle intensified, and Cole heard the snap of rounds passing, and he understood in that moment that to go back was to lose Voss as well. To go back was to break the fundamental rule. To go back was to sacrifice the team for one man. To go back was to fail the person he was responsible for. Cole did not stop. YBAM did not stop. They continued upslope, supporting Langford between them, while behind them Danny Voss dove for the tree line and found it was too far, and the NVA fire was too heavy, and John Boigna lay in the clearing with his rifle across the rocks, and his eyes seeing nothing at all. There was no grief yet. There was only speed. Only the mechanical act of moving a wounded prisoner toward a position of relative safety. YBAM's face did not change. The Jirai man had been a soldier longer than anyone in the team. He understood the calculus. He understood that the body you could not retrieve was still gone. That understanding was a terrible thing, a necessary thing, a thing that separated soldiers from civilians. They reached the ridgeline. YPA continued firing his M60. The machine gun's voice was steady, purposeful. Voss was somewhere in the smoke and noise, and Cole could not see him. And that was information Cole chose not to process because processing it would cost him speed. Eddie Marsh was at the radio, his glasses taped where they had broken last week in the insertion. His voice a constant stream of abbreviated language that only soldiers understood. "Casualty report," Cole said. "1," Marsh responded. "Y John hit. Status unknown. Cannot recover. NVA closing from west and south. Artillery support available in 7 minutes. LZ is 2 kilometers east." Cole looked at Langford. The prisoner's one good eye was closed now. The man was conscious, but moving past the point where consciousness meant much. Shock, pain, exhaustion. The simple fact of having been beaten past the point where the body could process anything except survival. "Move out," Cole said into the throat mic. "All teams, break position. Heading east. Formation, Bravo." They began to move. YKPA left his M60 at the position where it sat, ammunition expended. The Montagnard fell back with precision. Voss appeared from the smoke, and Cole saw that his left arm was bleeding, and that he was limping, but that he was alive, and that he was bringing himself out of the clearing at a controlled pace that did not break the unit's tempo. The jungle accepted them. The space between the trees became their reality. The sound of pursuit followed. Whistles, voices. The particular sound of a military unit discovering that its enemy was moving and attempting to follow. Cole knew the terrain ahead. He had studied maps. He had run the approach routes. But maps were drawings, and terrain was living. Maps did not show the streams swollen with monsoon water. Maps did not show the deadfall blocking the direct approach. Maps did not show the way that exhaustion pulled at his own legs, despite the discipline he had trained into them. Langford was slowing. YBAM carried him now, the prisoner's arm around the Montagnard's neck. Voss moved to Cole's side, his arm hanging at an angle that suggested it was very close to not working at all. Marsh kept the radio contact open. Artillery was being coordinated. Air support was being discussed and denied, and being discussed again. Nothing was available immediately. Nothing was available soon. They had themselves. They had the jungle. They had the fact that they understood this forest better than their pursuers. And behind them, getting closer with each kilometer, came the NVA. The day was warming. The gray light of pre-dawn was becoming the gold light of early morning. Around them, the jungle was waking fully, the sound of birds and insects rising to a crescendo that was almost deafening. This was the time when the jungle was most active, the time when predators and prey moved with urgency. Cole thought of Ejon. The boy had been eager. The boy had been young. The boy had wanted to prove something to men who barely knew how to value his proof. Now the boy was alone in a clearing with a rifle across rocks. Now the boy was becoming a memory. Now the boy was part of the cost of this operation. The cost was still being calculated. Cole understood that. They were not safe yet. They were moving towards safety. The LZ was 2 kilometers east, but distance was not measured only in meters. It was measured in pursuit, in ammunition, in the will to keep moving when movement became the only thing that stood between life and capture. Wybam was speaking, not words. Montagnard speech. Something in Jirai that Cole did not understand, but that sounded like mourning, passed through the filter of rage. The Jirai man was angry. Cole had never heard anger in Wybam's voice. The point man maintained absolute composure, always. This was new. This was dangerous. Wybam had trained Wyjon, had taught him, had prepared him for moments of violence. And the moment had come, and Wyjon had not survived it. The calculation of grief was happening inside the Montagnard's chest, and Cole understood that Wybam was processing something that could not be processed and would not be forgotten. He could not afford to comfort the man. Comfort was a luxury. Movement was the only currency that mattered. They continued east. Behind them, the voices of pursuit grew louder. Not closer necessarily. Sound traveled strangely through jungle, but louder, more numerous, more determined. The NVA wanted their prisoner back. The NVA wanted revenge for the assault. The NVA wanted to transform this capture into a victory by destroying the team that had taken their captive. The stream appeared suddenly, not on a map, not telegraphed by sound, just suddenly present, a brown ribbon of water cutting across their path, moving fast from recent rain. Cole calculated the crossing. 50 meters, open exposure on both sides, current that looked dangerous. And behind them, close enough now that Cole could hear individual voices, came the NVA soldiers. Ikpa went first. The big Montagnard carrier moved into the water with the focused determination of a man who had crossed hostile rivers before. He held his rifle high. He was looking for purchase with each step. He moved slowly. He moved deliberately. He reached the far side. Yibam followed, supporting Langford, who was now entirely unconscious. The prisoner's body simply hung between the Montagnard and Cole. Dead weight, literal weight. Hundreds of pounds of unconscious man in water that wanted to sweep them away. Voss went behind them. The sergeant's right side was soaked in blood now. Cole could see that the wound was worse than he had initially understood. But Voss moved. Voss moved because stopping was not an option. Marsh came last, The radio held above the water, maintaining the signal even as the river tried to take his footing. Cole was at the rear, covering, his SAR-15 ready, watching the tree line where the MACV would emerge. Any moment now, any second. The calculation was precise. They had covered perhaps 900 meters since leaving the clearing. The MACV knew the direction of travel. The MACV would be projecting the path. The MACV would be cutting angles to intercept. The first soldier came through the trees at a run. Cole fired. A short burst. 2 rounds. The soldier fell. Another appeared. Cole fired again. The SAR-15 responded with its particular authority. The jungle was no longer quiet. The jungle was a place of gunfire and voices and the awful reality of combat. Cole moved into the water. It was cold. It was violent. It was moving fast enough that each step required absolute commitment. He did not look back. He did not allow himself the luxury of knowing if he was being pursued with precision or merely being observed. The far bank seemed very far away. Distance stretched. Movement slowed. The human body in crisis seemed to move at half speed, while everything else accelerated. The NVA fire was sporadic but intensifying. Cole reached the far bank. His team was already ahead, moving into the jungle beyond. YBAM carried Langford. Voss was moving despite what looked like a shattered arm. YPA was taking position with an AK-47 he must have taken from a fallen NVA soldier, because his M60 was long gone. Eddie Marsh kept the radio open. The voice on the other end of the transmission was staying calm, which meant someone higher up was staying calm, which meant there was still hope that extraction could be achieved. The jungle received them again. The depth of vegetation became their shelter. The sound of pursuit continued. The NVA did not have the discipline to stop. They did not have the training to understand that pushing into unknown jungle against an enemy that understood the terrain was a formula for casualties. They pushed anyway. The LZ was drawing closer. Not in distance. Distance was still 1,500 meters. But in time. In the number of moments that could be endured. In the number of kilometers that could be covered before bodies and ammunition and the fundamental human capacity for movement all reached their limit simultaneously. Cole's mind was a thing divided. One part was present, calculating terrain, measuring distance, monitoring his team's status. The other part was in the clearing, where John Boigna lay with a rifle across rocks. The young Montagnard would be found soon. Found by NVA soldiers. Found by men who would do things to the body. That was the nature of this war. That was the mathematics of conflict in this place. And Cole had chosen to leave him. Cole had made the decision that retrieving the body would cost more than it was worth. This was what command meant. This was what being responsible for other men meant. You made decisions that haunted you. You calculated the value of human life in meters and ammunition, and the capacity of remaining personnel to continue operating. You did not get to hold the body you left behind. You only got to carry the knowledge that you had left it. 900 meters, 800, 700. The LZ was a small clearing, barely visible on the maps Cole had studied, perhaps 50 meters across, big enough for a slick to come in, big enough if the pilots were willing to take fire, big enough if timing was absolutely perfect. The pursuit was still behind them, but beginning to attenuate. The NVA soldiers were beginning to realize that the jungle was infinite and the enemy was disciplined, and that continuing to push forward meant accepting casualties without clear strategic gain. Some discipline was returning. The rate of pursuit was slowing. They could see the LZ now, a break in the vegetation, a space where the jungle opened to the sky. Eddie Marsh was speaking into the radio. "All other, this is bright light. We have the package. We are at the LZ. We need extraction now." The response came back immediately. "Bright light. Rotation is 2 minutes out. Hold position. We are seeing friendlies approaching from the north. Can you identify yourself?" Cole's team was moving into the clearing. Wybam laid Langford down carefully at the center. The prisoner was breathing. His one good eye was opening and closing. He was not dead. That was all that mattered. Waipa moved to the perimeter with the AK-47. Voss positioned himself with a clear field of fire. Cole stayed in the tree line, rifle up, watching the approach the NVA would make. Eddie Marsh sat with the radio, his taped glasses catching the morning sun. The sound of helicopter rotors came first as a vibration in the ground, then as a whisper in the air, then as a roar that filled the entire universe. The slick appeared above the trees, banking hard, moving fast. The door gunner's weapon was already in motion. The team began to move to the aircraft. Wybam carried Langford. Waipa provided rear security. Voss moved across the clearing with that terrible limp. Eddie Marsh spoke final coordinates into the radio, and behind them, in the jungle, the NVA soldiers were deciding whether to push through the tree line and face the firepower of a helicopter gunship, or whether to pull back and accept that this operation had failed. They decided to pull back. The rattle of the door gun was more powerful than any argument. The slick came in hard and fast. The rotors beat the air into submission. Cole was the last man out of the tree line. He moved across the clearing with the precision that came only when you understood that every step was potentially your last. The jungle behind him was empty of organized pursuit, empty of visible threat, full of the memory of Waijan Buon Ya. Cole reached the aircraft. Hands reached out to pull him aboard. His team was already there. Langford was strapped into a seat, his head lolling against his chest. Wybam sat beside the prisoner, his hand on the American's shoulder as if even now, in the relative safety of the aircraft, guard duty required physical contact. The slick lifted. The jungle fell away. The clearing where Waijan lay became smaller, and then invisible, and then a memory. Cole closed his eyes. The operation was over. The cost was calculated. 1 prisoner recovered. 1 young soldier left behind. Wybam's face, immobile as stone, containing a grief that would transform into determination, and then into something harder. The helicopter carried them north toward the border. Behind them, Laos held its secrets. Waijan Buon Ya among them. The grief came later, after debriefing, after reports, after the cleanup and the inventory of what had been lost and what had been gained. Cole stood outside the briefing room at the compound. The sun was setting. The day was moving toward night. Somewhere, probably in a field hospital in Thailand, Sergeant Tom Langford was being fed intravenously and receiving the kind of care that the camp's medics could not provide. The man would recover. Intelligence suggested he had been held for 14 days. Intelligence suggested he would have information about NVA movements and capabilities that would be valuable. Intelligence suggested that the mission had been a success. All of that was true. None of that made it any easier to stand in the fading light and know that Waijan Buon Ya was still in that clearing, that his body was becoming part of the Laotian landscape, that his name would not appear in official reports, that his sacrifice would exist only in the memory of the men who had served with him. Wybam came out of the barracks. The Jirai point man walked to where Cole stood. They did not speak. They stood together in silence as the sun continued its descent, and the jungle accepted the darkness, and the night creatures began their own operations. This was how soldiers honored loss. This was how the cost was remembered. The operation was filed under bright light. One of many. One of dozens. One of the endless series of insertions and extractions that filled the war in Laos. The official report would list it as successful. Prisoner recovered. NVA forces engaged. Minimum friendly casualties. All of that was accurate from a certain perspective. From the perspective of the command structure. From the perspective of the intelligence briefers and the strategic planners. But from the perspective of the men who lived it, success was a more complicated thing. Success was the knowledge that you had done what was asked of you. Success was the fact that most of your team had come out. Success was the fact that the prisoner was alive. Success also included the memory of Wai John Buonya checking his grenades with that eager expression. Success included the moment when the young man went backward with the impact of a bullet. Success included the understanding that you had made a choice to leave him, that you would always make that choice again, that this was the true mathematics of command. The war would continue. More insertions would follow. More men would be lost. More prisoners would be rescued. The cycle would continue until it did not, until the war ended, until the jungle was allowed to exist again without the intrusion of soldiers and their purposes. But that was not today. Today was only the aftermath of bright light. The jungle had turned into a corridor of fire. Cole moved through it with brutal purpose, his boonie hat pulled low, eyes scanning the canopy ahead while his ears tracked the sounds behind. The trail was hunting them now, not searching, hunting. Wybam Ni ran point, his small Jirai frame bent beneath the weight of Tom Langford. The prisoner sagged against Wybam's back like a man already dead, one eye swollen shut, his breathing shallow and wet. Barely a pulse left in him. But they were bringing him home. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Rifle fire crackled through the canopy. Single shots at first, then short bursts as NVA regulars closed the distance. Rounds snapped through the branches overhead, shredding leaves, sending splinters of wood spinning through the humid air. Cole did not increase his pace. Speed got you killed in the jungle. Speed made you careless. Speed turned disciplined soldiers into panicked men, and panicked men did not survive the trail. Eddie. Marsh ran beside Cole, the PRC-25 radio strapped to his back, the heavy batteries dragging at his thin frame. His taped glasses caught the filtered sunlight. His voice was steady on the handset, crisp and professional, even as another burst of fire stitched through the trees 10 meters to their left. Nail 25, this is Bright Light 6. We are 1 click south of the primary landing zone. Enemy in close pursuit from the north. Request immediate air support. Over. The response crackled back through static. Air was inbound. 30 minutes. That was an eternity when an NVA battalion was pouring down the mountainside behind you. Sergeant Danny Voss appeared from the left flank, running low, his M79 bloopers swinging from one hand and his CAR-15 in the other. His red-brown buzz cut was dark with sweat. He was grinning. That terrible, feral grin that meant the training had taken over and the fear had been boxed away somewhere deep. They are maybe 200 meters back, Voss said to Cole. Coming hard. At least a reinforced squad. Maybe more. A reinforced squad. That meant riflemen, automatic weapons, and rocket-propelled grenades. That meant the NVA were not interested in caution. Cole made the hand signal for suppression. Tchepone acknowledged without speaking. The tail gunner appeared from the right flank, his angular face calm as still water. 130 pounds of muscle carrying an M60 machine gun that weighed nearly as much as his rucksack. Ipa did not know fear in the way that other men knew it. For Ipa, fear was simply information. Data to be processed and filed away while the hands did their work. "Suppress that left ridge for 60 seconds, Cole said, then move to us. Ipa nodded once. He dropped into a firing position behind a fallen mahogany trunk, braced the M60's bipod, and opened fire. The sound was enormous. It swallowed the jungle. Every other noise became small and distant beneath the hammering of the M60. The NVA advance paused. Not stopped, but paused. Because no amount of training prepares a man for the full fury of a machine gun cutting through a mountain valley at close range. Cole used that moment. He moved his people forward in short, practiced bounds. Voss first, crouching low, his eyes searching for ambush positions. Then Wybam with Langford, the Jar-Eye's legs pumping despite the weight on his back. Then Marsh, the PRC-25 bouncing against his spine, the handset still pressed to his ear. Cole counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. 50 meters gained. 60. YKPA's position was getting exposed. The NVA would be flanking by now. That was their doctrine. Pin the machine gun, flank the position, close the distance. At the 60-second mark, Cole made a fist. YKPA locked back the bolt, grabbed the M60 by its carrying handle, and ran. He moved in a low crouch, the machine gun held against his hip, ammunition belt swinging. He passed Cole without a word and kept moving forward. Behind them, the first mortar round impacted. Not close, maybe 300 meters, but close enough to mean the NVA were walking fire toward them. Close enough to mean time was running out. They leapfrogged twice more. Each time Ipa dropped into position, fired for 60 seconds, and then moved. Each time the NVA advance stalled just long enough for the team to gain ground. It was textbook SOG doctrine. It was the choreography of survival that these men had practiced until it became instinct. But the jungle was thinning. The canopy was opening up, and that meant less cover, less concealment, and more exposure to the NVA mortar crews who were dialing in their position with each successive round. Marsh was still on the radio, still steady, still calling grids and requesting support in the calm, professional voice of a man who might have been ordering supplies rather than fighting for his life. That was the thing about Eddie Marsh. 21 years old, from Detroit, with his taped glasses and his anxious hands. But when the shooting started, something in him went very still and very clear. Nail 25, bright light. Be advised, we are approximately 500 meters from the primary LZ. Enemy is closing. We need that air now. Over. Copy, bright light. Nail flight is 2 minutes out. Hang tight. 2 minutes. Cole looked at the jungle behind them, at the muzzle flashes blooming through the undergrowth like angry orange flowers. 2 minutes was a very long time. The rocket-propelled grenade did not give warning. It arrived as pure violence. The explosion detonated 10 meters behind Cole's position, in the space between him and Marsh. The blast wave hit Cole first, a wall of hot air and shrapnel that threw him sideways into a tree trunk. His ears went white. His vision narrowed to a single bright point. Then the world came back. Sound first, the ringing in his ears, the crack of small arms fire, Voss shouting something he could not understand. Cole turned and saw Marsh. The radio operator was on his back. The PRC-25 had taken the worst of the shrapnel. Its casing was torn open, wires exposed, sparking. But the shrapnel had not stopped at the radio. Fragments had punched through the housing and into Marsh's back, into his side. His uniform was dark and wet. Marsh's eyes were open. His taped glasses were cracked but still on his face. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. His right hand was still holding the radio handset. His left hand was pressing against his side, fingers slick. Cole was beside him in 2 steps. "Marsh, stay with me." Marsh looked up at Cole. His eyes were very clear. That was the thing that Cole would remember later. Not the wound, not the ruined radio. The clarity in Eddie Marsh's eyes, as if the explosion had burned away everything except the essential truth of who he was and what needed to happen next. "Radio is finished," Marsh said. His voice was steady. That steadiness was the worst part. "Handset still works. Antenna is damaged, but it will transmit. Short range only." Cole took the handset. His hands were shaking. He made them stop. Marsh reached into the cargo pocket of his trousers and pulled out a small notebook. The SOI. Signal Operating Instructions. Every frequency, every call sign, every encryption code they would need to reach the extraction helicopters. "Everything you need," Marsh said. "Call it in. Bring them home." "We are bringing you home too," Cole said. Marsh shook his head. The movement was small, economical. The movement of a man who was conserving what little remained. "I am done moving 10. The math does not work. YBAM cannot carry 2 men. You cannot carry me and lead the team." "Tell them we are coming," Marsh said. His voice did not waver. "Tell them bright light is inbound." Cole looked into Eddie Marsh's eyes and saw a man saying goodbye without the luxury of time to do it properly. 21 years old, from Detroit. He had been in country for 7 months. He had volunteered for SOG because he believed in the mission. He had volunteered for Bright Light because he believed that no man should be left behind in the jungle. Now he was dying on the trail because of that belief. "Your family," Cole started. "Will understand," Marsh said. His voice was quieter now. "My mother will understand. My father will not, but my mother will." He closed his eyes, opened them again. "Go, Cole. The team needs you more than I do." Cole placed his hand on Marsh's shoulder. He held it there for 3 seconds. That was all the time the war would give them. 3 seconds of human contact between 2 men who understood what was happening. Then Cole stood up. He slung the damaged radio over his own shoulder, feeling the weight settle against his back. He put the SOI notebook in his breast pocket. He picked up his CAR-15. "Voss," Cole said. His voice was flat. "Operational. You have point. YBAM. Keep moving with Langford. YKPA. You are tail. I have the radio." Nobody asked about Marsh. They could see. They understood. They moved. Faster now, because the NVA were closing, and because stopping meant dying, and because Eddie Marsh had bought them time with his life, and wasting that time was something none of them could bear. Voss took point, his stocky frame pushing through the undergrowth with the determination of a man who had decided that everyone behind him was going to survive. YBAM followed, Langford still on his back, the Jarai's legs finding reserves of strength that should not have existed. Cole moved in the center, the damaged radio pressing against his spine, the handset in one hand and his CAR-15 in the other. Behind them, YPA held the rear alone. The M60 fired in short, controlled bursts, methodical, disciplined, each burst buying another 10 meters of distance between the team and the NVA pursuit. Cole keyed the handset. The antenna was damaged. The range would be limited, but it was all they had. Nail 2-5, this is Bright Light 6. Bright Light 1-2 is KIA. I have the radio now. We are 400 meters from the primary LZ. Request immediate danger close. How copy? Static. Then, copy, Bright Light. Nail flight is overhead now. We see movement in the tree line. Confirm friendlies north of the creek bed. Affirmative. Friendlies are north. Everything south is hostile. Roger that. Rolling in. The first A1 Sky Raider came in from the west, low and fast, its radial engine roaring with a sound that seemed to belong to a different era. At 500 feet, it released its ordnance. Napalm. A burning line of orange and white spread across the tree line to the south. 200 meters of jungle transformed into inferno. The sound reached them a moment later. A dull, terrible roar, like the earth itself was exhaling fire. Then the second Sky Raider. 20-millimeter cannon fire stitching along the ridgeline, the muzzle flashes visible even in the afternoon light. Dirt and debris erupted skyward. Trees snapped and fell. The NVA assault wavered. YKPA kept his M60 trained on the tree line anyway, taking no chances. That was YKPA. The bomb crater appeared ahead, old, weathered, maybe 10 meters across. A scar left by a B-52 strike months or years ago. Just wide enough for a helicopter to land. Just wide enough to die in if the NVA were accurate with their remaining weapons. Cole pushed the team into the crater. YBAM laid Langford down on the packed earth, the prisoner's one working eye flickering open for a moment, before closing again. Voss took the eastern rim. YPA took the south. The M60 braced on a shattered tree stump. Cole positioned himself at the northern lip and keyed the radio. Nail 2-5. Bright Light. We are in the LZ. Popping smoke. Request King Bee for extraction. 5 souls plus 1 prisoner. Over. Cole pulled a smoke grenade from his webbing. Yellow smoke. He did not announce the color. He twisted the pin, tossed the grenade to the edge of the crater, and waited. The yellow smoke bloomed thick and bright, rising through the humid air, curling above the canopy in a column that would be visible for a kilometer. Bright Light. Nail 2-5. I identify yellow smoke. Confirm? Affirmative, Cole said. Yellow smoke is us. Roger. King Bee is 2 minutes out. We will keep working the tree line. Nail flight. Make another pass. The Sky Raiders came around again. More cannon fire. More napalm along a secondary position to the southeast. The NVA fire slackened, not stopped entirely. Small arms still cracked from the jungle edge, rounds snapping overhead. But the organized assault had broken. YKPA fired a long burst toward a cluster of muzzle flashes at the southern tree line. The flashes stopped. He shifted his aim and waited for the next target. His ammunition was running low. 2 belts remaining, maybe 300 rounds. Enough for 2 more minutes of sustained fire. After that, the M60 would be empty, and why Kapa would be fighting with his sidearm. The sound of helicopter rotors came first, a distant thumping that grew louder, separating from the background noise of explosions and gunfire until it became the dominant sound in the world. Then the helicopter appeared, a CH-34 Choctaw, Sikorsky built, painted in the mottled greens and browns of the Vietnamese Air Force. A King Bee, one of the bravest crews in the war. Vietnamese pilots who flew into places that American helicopter crews had been ordered to avoid. The pilot brought it in fast and steep, reading the terrain with the instinct of a man who had done this 100 times and expected to die on the 101st. The nose came up to brake speed. The tail rotor swung wide. Door gunners hung from the sides, their M60s already firing into the tree line. The rotor wash sent the yellow smoke spiraling away. Dust and debris from the bomb crater swirled up in a blinding cloud. Cole covered his eyes and watched through his fingers as the big helicopter settled into the crater with less than a meter of clearance on either side. The crew chief appeared in the cargo door, his flight helmet gleaming, his hand extended. "Get him loaded," Cole shouted over the rotor noise, pointing to Langford. Wybom grabbed the prisoner under the arms and dragged him to the helicopter. The crew chief reached down, seized Langford's harness, and pulled him aboard. 3 seconds. That was all it took. "Boss, go," Cole called. Boss ran. Low beneath the rotors, his M79 swinging, his boots pounding the packed earth. He reached the cargo door and threw himself inside. Wybom. The Jirai hesitated for one instant, looking south, looking at Waipa, still firing the M60, still holding the perimeter by himself. Wybom's brass bracelet caught the light. "Go," Cole said, not a request. Wybom ran. He made the helicopter in 3 strides, and the crew chief pulled him aboard. Waipa was still firing, still calm, still absolutely committed to being the last Montagnard off the ground. That was tail gunner doctrine. That was the code between soldiers who had decided that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that someone else's survival mattered more than your own. "Waipa," Cole shouted. "Time to leave." Waipa fired one final burst, a long, sustained roar that emptied his last belt of ammunition. The brass casings cascaded across the crater floor like gold coins spilling from a broken jar. Then he locked back the bolt, grabbed the empty M60, and stood. He did not run. He walked. Backward, his angular face turned toward the jungle, his eyes never leaving the tree line. 6 long strides to the helicopter. The crew chief grabbed his arm and hauled him aboard. Cole was the last man on the ground, the last American in the crater. The rotor wash hammered at his boonie hat and tore at his fatigues. Behind him, the NVA were regrouping. Muzzle flashes reappeared at the southern tree line. Rounds snapped past his head, close enough to hear the supersonic crack. He ran. 10 meters to the helicopter. The door gunners were firing over his head, their tracers arcing into the jungle. The crew chief was leaning out, both hands extended, shouting something in Vietnamese that Cole could not hear over the noise of the rotors and the gunfire and his own heartbeat. 5 meters. Cole could see Voss inside, reaching for him. Could see Wybom's face. Could see Langford laid out on the deck. He jumped. Not onto the ramp. Into the air above it. For a moment he hung there, suspended between the ground and the aircraft, between the jungle and safety. Then Voss's hands closed on his webbing and pulled him inward. He crashed onto the deck of the helicopter, the damaged radio slamming against the metal floor. "Go," the crew chief shouted to the pilot. "Go now." The nose came up. The rotors bit into the air. The ground fell away. The bomb crater shrank beneath them. The jungle spread out in every direction like a green ocean, and the muzzle flashes at the tree line became small and distant, and finally disappeared. The jungle fell away. Smaller. Farther. Unreal. Cole pulled himself up and looked out through the open cargo door. Below, the trail disappeared into the canopy, as if the war they had been fighting existed only in the suffering of men on the ground, and not in the green geography visible from the air. He turned back to the interior of the helicopter. Langford lay on the deck, still breathing, still alive. His one open eye was staring at the ceiling of the aircraft without seeing it. Voss was checking his pulse, his freckled face serious and still. Wybam sat with his head against the fuselage, his eyes closed, the brass bracelet resting against his knee. Kapa was already asleep, the empty M60 cradled across his lap. Nobody spoke. There were no words for what they had done, no debrief, no after-action analysis that could contain the last 72 hours. They had gone into the jungle as 6 men. They were coming out as 4, plus 1 broken prisoner. Eddie Marsh was not with them. Yujan Bonya was not with them. The crew chief offered Cole a canteen. Cole took it and drank. The water was warm and tasted like plastic, and it was the best thing he had ever consumed. The flight back to Kontum took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of engine noise and wind through the cargo door. 40 minutes of watching the green give way to rice paddies, to roads, to the fragile structures of human civilization. The helicopter descended toward the airfield at Kontum. Cole could see the compound from the air. The Tactical Operations Center, the team houses, the aid station, the Montagnard quarters on the eastern edge of the perimeter. The skids touched down. The rotors slowed. A medical team was already running toward them with a stretcher. They took Langford first. The prisoner was laid on the stretcher and carried away at a run, a medic holding an IV bag above his head. Cole watched him go. That was the whole thing. That was why they went into the green. That was why Eddie Marsh was not coming home. Cole and his men walked off the helicopter slowly, not because they were tired, though they were, but because the transition from the trail to the rear required a different pace. The mind needed time to catch up with the body. The nervous system needed permission to stop listening for the sounds of pursuit. Voss was the first to speak. "I need a cigarette." Yikpa looked at him. "And a beer." Yi. Beham said nothing. His eyes were somewhere else. Somewhere in the jungle, probably. Somewhere near the body of Yujan Bonya, the man who had covered their withdrawal from the prisoner camp and had not lived to see it succeed. The debriefing took 3 hours. Cole sat in the back room of the Tactical Operations Center and recounted the mission in the careful, clinical language that the Army required. Where they had inserted, where they had found Langford, the composition of the NVA force, the contact, the pursuit, the 2 men who did not come back. An intelligence captain asked the questions in the tone of a man reading from a checklist. Did you observe uniform markings? Did you hear radio traffic? Estimate of enemy strength? Cole answered everything with precision, but his mind was elsewhere. Still in the green. Still listening for the crack of small arms fire that meant the NVA had found them again. When the debrief ended, the captain waved him away. "Get some rest, Cole. Colonel wants you at 0600. Cole walked out into the warm Kontum afternoon. The sun was harsh and too bright. The air smelled like diesel fuel and cook fires and red Vietnamese dust. He stood outside the operations center for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. letting the reality of survival settle into his body. Then he walked to the Montagnard compound. Wybam was sitting outside the family quarters. His small frame was slumped against the concrete wall. His crossbow lay across his knees, unstrung. He was staring at the ground between his boots. Inside the quarters, Cole could hear the sound of a woman weeping. The sound carried across the compound, across the wire, across the small distance that separated the living from the grieving. Waijan Buanya's wife, his children. Cole sat down beside Wybam without speaking. They sat that way for a long time, maybe an hour, just existing in the same space, carrying the same silence. Combat created a language between men that did not require words. It created bonds that could not be explained to anyone who had not shared them. Finally, Wybam spoke. I told his wife that he died bravely, that he saved our lives. Cole nodded. That is true. I told her we killed many enemy soldiers for him. That is also true. Wybam turned the brass bracelet on his wrist, slowly, as if measuring something only he could see. It does not help her. The truth does not stop the weeping. But I think she needed to hear it. She needed to know that his death carried weight. Cole understood. He understood that the deaths of men like Waijan Buanya would be filed in reports that nobody would read, entered into databases that nobody would search, and eventually erased by time and the steady accumulation of other missions, other names, other deaths. But here, in this compound, among his people, Waijan's name would be spoken for years. Cole stood up. I have reports to write. Wybam nodded. He did not stand. He remained against the wall, his crossbow across his knees, his eyes on the ground. Cole left him there. The after-action report took the rest of the afternoon. Cole sat in his hooch and reduced the mission to military language. 4 clicks inserted by King B. Enemy contact at grid reference November Delta 442. 1 prisoner extracted, condition critical. 2 friendly KIA. Recommend additional air assets for future bright light operations in this area of operations. Words arranged in a way that made the impossible sound routine. That was the necessity of war. You could not function if you felt the full weight of every loss. So you arranged them on paper, filed them in the operations drawer, and moved on. Voss found him at dusk. The 1-1 had a cigarette behind his ear and 2 warm beers he had acquired through means Cole did not ask about. He handed one to Cole and sat down on the adjacent cot. They did not speak for several minutes. Voss smoked. Cole drank the warm beer. Outside, the sun was painting the sky over Kontum in shades of orange and copper, and the jungle on the horizon was turning from green to black as the light faded. We brought him home, Voss said finally. That was the mission. That was the whole thing. We lost 2 getting him, Cole said. I know. Voss took a long drag from his cigarette. The ember flared orange. And tomorrow there will be another mission, another team, another man who needs to come home. The war does not pause for grief, Cole. Cole set the beer down and stared at the wall of his hooch. He thought about Marsh, about the way the young man had handed him the radio with those words, "Tell them we are coming." Even dying, Marsh had been thinking about the mission, about the men who needed to know the team was still in the fight. He thought about Waijan, about the Montagnard who had stayed behind to cover their withdrawal from the prisoner camp, who had fired his weapon until it was empty, and then had not gotten up again. The math of war. Save 1, lose 2. The scales never balanced, they never would. But that was not the point. The point was the belief, the absolute, unshakable. Belief that no one gets left behind. That when a man went into the jungle, he went with the knowledge that if he did not come back, someone would come looking for him. That was not strategy. That was not military doctrine. That was the foundation of everything. Bright light. That was what they called the rescue missions. The name implied illumination, clarity, the kind of light that reveals truth and burns away deception. And what was the truth that a bright light mission revealed? Cole thought about this as the darkness settled over Kontum. The truth was that certain men in certain places held a belief so fundamental that it overrode the reasonable human impulse to preserve oneself. The belief that the debt you owed to the man beside you did not expire when circumstances became difficult. The debt remained until that man was brought home, or until you died in the attempt. That was the covenant. That was what a 1-0 accepted when he accepted the radio, when he accepted the responsibility of leading men into the green and bringing them back again. Tomorrow would bring another briefing, another insertion, another 72 hours running through the jungle with the trail behind him and the landing zone ahead. Another set of names to remember. Another set of frequencies to memorize. Another man who needed to come home. But tonight, Cole could rest. Tonight he could sit in the relative safety of Kontum and hold two truths at once. They had brought Langford home, and the cost had been 2 good men. Both truths were real. Both truths would remain. The day you stop going back for your people is the day you stop being worth saving yourself. Cole did not know where he had first heard that. Perhaps no one had said it. Perhaps it was simply something that lived in the space between missions, in the silence between radio transmissions, in the quiet that came after the helicopter lifted you out of the jungle and carried you back to the world. The sun was gone now. The stars were coming out over Kontum, indifferent and ancient and impossibly far away. Tomorrow the war would continue. Tomorrow another team would go into the green. But tonight, in this hooch, with a warm beer and the sound of Voss breathing on the next cot, Cole closed his eyes, and the jungle waited.